Well, we are here. This is the inaugural episode, actually, of Think Like a Teacher podcast. So I'm super happy to have you here. So where is it that you're based, and kind of what are you up to these days?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's a real treat to be on. So are you saying this is the first episode?
First ever, man. Yeah.
Wow, what a treat.
Yeah.
What an enormous privilege. When I write my biography or I get AI to do it for me, this is going to take center stage. Look, so I'm a teacher by trade. I'm a third generation teacher. So my granddad was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, and I'm one of four boys, and three of us are teachers. We have one black sheep in the family who went into pastor a church, but there's still hope for him. I think
that's teaching, though. He's
it's a species of teaching, isn't it? And so a background in high school history education. I absolutely love it, and now I'm split between doing that. I also do a lot of consulting with schools around change and AI and how do we adapt to that. And I have a software called My Teacher Aid, which helps teachers do three important things, which is save time, be more creative, and have a bigger impact in their classroom. So between those things and having three kids, 3 and under, that keeps me pretty busy.
Oh, 3 kids, 3 and under. That's impressive. Yeah, I've got 4, but we got the oldest is 10, and then the youngest is 2. But they're all boys, so it's busy and loud.
Yeah, man, same here. And we'll shoot for a 4th like you, and we'll see if we can't roll the dice and get a boy as well. I only had brothers growing up, and funnily enough, my wife did too. So we only know what's going on with boys. It would be a real gamble if we had a girl.
Awesome. Well, cool. So you're still in the classroom there, and then also running My Teacher Aid. How's that been?
Correct.
Kind of balancing both of those things?
Look, it's been really interesting. So I love being in the classroom. It's one of the things that I just feel like I was put on earth to do, teach in a classroom. I love it, and I get a lot of joy from it. It actually fills the tank rather than empties it. So that's been really nice. At the moment, My Teacher Aid is a pretty lean business. So we offer software to schools, as I said, to do those really important things, save time, be more creative, and have a bigger impact. Now, our software, at the moment, we've got a couple of thousand teachers on the software, and we're finding that actually it's quite intuitive and user-friendly, and the training we offer can often be done what we call asynchronously, so not at the same time. It doesn't have to be delivered in person. So we're finding actually that there isn't a massive time crunch. I'm finding there's still enough time to enjoy my family and have some downtime and do some thinking and writing and these sorts of things. So I love it. I'm the sort of person that I can't really sit around and pick a scab. I don't rest very well. I really enjoy having a couple of projects on the go. So between the teaching, consulting and software, I'm finding that it's really stimulating. And I guess the second part to that, Sam, is that they all sort of lean into each other, don't they? Like, in my teaching practice, I use AI a lot. And when I'm building my AI software, I'm leveraging my experience as a teacher. And when I'm consulting, I'm pulling on it all and bringing it to bear on schools. So it's not like I'm trying to do 17 separate things at once. They do all sort of coexist in the same ecosystem quite nicely.
I'm super pumped to hear that. I'm kind of in a similar boat myself, where half the time I'm teaching. I teach advanced bio and anat and phys. And then the other half of my time during the school day, I get to do stuff like this. So I'm an instructional coach for our school, and I help teachers master technology. So I'm the digital coach. Do a lot with AI. We use it a ton. I encourage teachers to use it. It's a fantastic thing. And I definitely want to touch on that a little bit more. For our coaching team, each month we have a theme that we're focusing on to help our teachers. So this month, and I don't know how it is for you in your experience, but we use a block schedule. So what that means is we have 90-minute periods and 4 of them in a day. And it's a real challenge for, seasoned teachers. This is my 9th year, but even for new teachers, it's even harder to try to figure out what to do with all of that time. And you can't just lecture the whole time, and you can't do one activity. And so something that we're trying to incorporate is utilizing those first 15 minutes and the last 15 minutes for things like remediation, getting class started. And so I'm interested to know, in your experience, is that something that you've done with these big block schedules? And kind of what's your start of class protocol? What do you do?
I absolutely love that question because it's something I've thought a lot about. As a person, And as someone who's experienced a bit of life, and I have a religious upbringing, and I've been to certain kinds of schools throughout my life, I realize that not all time is equal. Right? Not all time is equal. Time has a certain architecture, perhaps, or a topography, and the way that we shape time is incredibly important. Okay, so I'm a big believer in simplifying things. As teachers, we think our job can be very complex. There's a lot going on, different pedagogical strategies, different options for teaching and learning. Really, we only have control over two things, and they're space and time. Right? That's all that we have, space and time. And so the architecture of time is incredibly important because it's a large part of what we can control. Also, psychologists tell us that people have a sort of bias towards remembering what you did at the start and at the end. It's called primacy and recency, right? So not only is there does time have a topography, but the start and the end are incredibly important in the way that we shape that. So I think your question's coming from a really well-informed place, Sam. What I like to do, I almost always start my classes with silent reading. Now, there's a number of reasons I do that. It's not exactly the most cutting edge pedagogy, or maybe it is, but it doesn't look like that. It's not like it's going to get a whole lot of likes on LinkedIn when I say I start my classes with silent reading. However, it does a few things. First of all, it's a predictable routine. And I'm of the opinion that actually our students, they need something that's predictable and repeatable, because so many of them are coming from places where their lives are not predictable. There's a lot of flux. They're not quite sure what they can stand on as a firm footing. They have issues around their identity. They have issues perhaps at home. What's going to be predictable at home? What's mum or dad going to feel like when I get home? They've lived through COVID and the pandemic. And so there's a whole lot of things in their lives which they're just not so sure about. And so I want them to know when I come into Mr. Matthews' class, I know for a fact we're going to do 7 minutes of silent reading. Okay, so that makes it a space where they have control, they know what's going on, and they can settle into that routine. And after that, I'll always start with a simple activity. It's like a hook for the rest of the lesson, and it gets them engaged. But I always start with that silent reading. Literacy, super important. Like, we know that reading really does move the needle. But also, and this is a big part of thinking about burnout, what am I going to do in a classroom? If I'm going to start my lesson, I could either come in 5 minutes early, put all the sheets on the tables, get my PowerPoint set up and my HDMI cord plugged in, and get my laptop ready to go. Or I could come in, everyone's doing their silent reading for 7 minutes, and I could do all that while the class has started. I don't know about you, but I'm not keen to take a haircut on my recess or lunch. And so I think not only does it help the students with a lot of evidence-based practices, but it helps me. And I'm all about those win-wins, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And that's pretty similar to how I start my day. I'm huge on relationships. Relationships, I think, are in my experience, one of the biggest reasons that students stay in class, come on time to class, and, play the game, so to speak, kind of get involved. And so I really, really love being at the door, greeting everybody, seeing each kid as they come in. But yeah, that same thing, having some kind of, like a hook, something that they know that this is what's happening. So would you say with your reading, I'm interested now, do they get like free choice on what they read, or does it have to do with your content area?
It really depends. So in some grades, I teach grade 7 to grade 10. So in some grades, the English department have said, we need everyone to be reading a book on Australian identity or on some other similar topic, on fiction or fantasy or whatever. In that case, I'll say, hey guys, you've already got a silent reading book. No need to double dip. You can bring that book to class. And that's great because, if they're only getting half an hour or an hour cumulative total throughout the week, some students are actually going to have a pretty hard time chewing through a book in that amount of time. So a little bit of extra space is fine. But say for my grade 10 class, my grade 10 history class, where we're studying World War II, there's just so much rich fiction that helps us explore some of those themes and ideas that are floating around with World War II that I say, hey, let's try and get a targeted specific book that's from that period of time, and then we're going to draw some parallels. I might actually do what's called a book tasting, where I take everyone to the library and I've pre-selected maybe 25 texts, and I know I've got a couple of copies of each. And so I'll print everyone out a sheet and say, okay, you get 3 lots of 10 minutes. And in every 10-minute chunk, you're going to look at a book, you're going to look at the front cover, you're going to read the back cover, you're going to read the first page, you're going to make some inferences about what it's about, and then you're going to rank sort of those 3 books in orders like 1 to 3, and you'll get one of those for the term to read. Okay, so there's a couple of options. It could just be any reading book, like the one they're doing for English, or it might actually be something I try and leverage in my instruction during the course of that unit. Those are the 2 options.
So how do you find that their engagement increases from having these 2 different things, what you're teaching in class and then what they're reading on their own?
Well, interestingly, one of the things that the research shows us, if you look into John Hattie, one of the things that he said that really stuck with me, and he's the visible learning guy, he says that actually mastery is a great predictor of enthusiasm. Mastery is a great predictor. So if students know what to do and can do what they've been asked to do, well, that really does genuinely predict their level of enthusiasm for that class. So on the biggest possible level, when a student is coming into my class and they know they're starting with 7 minutes of reading, even if that does nothing else, they know, all right, I can put a big tick in the box for the first activity in Mr. Matthews' class. I can do that. And again, that mastery, that level of competency actually breeds enthusiasm for the rest of the class. If they feel confident, if they feel like they know what's going on and they can do what's required, then that has really positive flow-on effects. Other than that, so say the readings are completely disconnected, there might be limited value for that in my lesson other than just having a nice smooth start and making sure everyone is peaceful and calm. If the readings are connected, say like in the Year 10 history example, I can actually encourage people during the class, because there might be 10 different books being read by 20 different students. I might say, by the way, this actually goes back to The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Jeremy, could you just tell us a little bit about how the first chapter opens up on the theme of identity and belonging and these sorts of things? So it opens up some options for some peer teaching. Again, the evidence shows us that that's a pretty high value proposition for us as educators.
I love those ideas. I'm going to actually take those, because with biology, I also teach IB biology. I'm sure you might be familiar with the IB program and framework. And so it's very, very kind of interconnected with what they're meant to learn and do, and understanding the global impact of what they do. And I think that would be an excellent way to kind of tie things in with, different scientists or experiments or discoveries, things like that. I love that idea. Okay, so you do 7 minutes of reading right at the start of class to kind of set the tone, that predictable thing. And you mentioned that you do some kind of hook to spearhead the rest of the lesson. What does that look like?
Well, that will often be trying to pull on existing knowledge that I've got and existing student interest and draw out a theme that's going to actually bear some fruit later on in the lesson. For example, I was just teaching a lesson the other day in World War I. All right, so that's grade 9 history in Australia. And we're looking at the theme of alliances. And actually, the big complex web of alliances is actually when you start to see, okay, these guys got in a war with these guys who were then allied with those fellas, and those guys were enemies with it. And it all just sort of, there's a big tangled mess which led all of Europe, and in fact, all of the European colonies, so basically the whole world, into this war. And so I just start off with a simple question like, have you ever stuck up for a friend when they were in an altercation? Or, have you ever had to stand up for a little brother or sister when they were being bullied? Something like that actually gets us thinking perhaps about alliances and our commitment to other people. But it's not saying, why would someone in Bosnia try and assassinate someone from Serbia or something like this. It's not drawing on specific content knowledge per se, but it is getting those themes running through the student's mind, which means that then when we get to those ideas later on in the lesson, they've got a few seedlings that are starting to sprout intellectually.
I think that's awesome. Trying to find ways to connect students' real world experiences to your content area, to things that maybe they haven't actually experienced. But really, I mean, human history is our own history, and we're living it all the time. The reasons why we make choices is because we're human people, and those choices were made before as well. And so I love making connections and doing things like that. How have you seen, this is kind of a switch topic, but it comes back, post-pandemic and all of these things, in the U.S. at least, and I'm sure it's probably similar globally as well, has attendance been a hard thing, like kids coming late to class or not showing up? And if so, what are some things that you've done to help kind of mitigate those effects?
So I haven't seen a big drop off in attendance, but what I have seen is some disengagement in the learning. So the students at my school, I teach at an independent Christian school, and what I'm seeing is there are more disengaged students, marginally more. But what I'm also seeing is that the learning gap in my classroom is so big. So in Australia, we didn't lock down for that long, especially in Tasmania. We were very blessed. I think an article came out in Time magazine during the pandemic. It said like Tasmania was one of the greatest places to be. We've got a natural land border and, we were just pretty isolated from the whole thing. So we only locked down for maybe 3-4 months something. So it wasn't that long. But what did I notice? Well, I noticed that actually some of my students, their learning just went to the moon. So it turns out having complete control over their schedule, being able to study what they want, when they want, that's exactly what they needed. And they doubled in intelligence in that 4 months. It was wild. And then there was another cohort of students that sort of just sat around and picked a scab the entire time. Like they didn't do any work. They might have played Roblox or Minecraft or done something, but they sure didn't learn. So what does that mean? We've got almost this bifurcated population when my grade 9 class has some people reading at a grade 10 or 11 level and some people reading at a grade 5 level now. And you go, okay, crumbs. Now, a big part of my pedagogical worldview is making sure everyone feels like they can do the work. It's that mastery, that competency that we were just talking about. So what I'm finding I'm doing as much as I possibly can is using artificial intelligence and really any technology I can to make sure I can put these students in a personalized, individualized, feedback-rich environment. And really anything that allows me to do that, well, it helps meet those student needs and that trickles down into engagement. If they feel like they know what's going on, if they can feel like they can do what's required, then there's a confident step in the right direction.
Yeah, so I guess coming back to what you were saying about having that, I know in Mr. Matthews' class, I've got this 7 minutes. That means I can do that thing. So the more confidence they build, it seems like in your experience, the more apt they are to be engaged with the further things that you ask them to do.
That's exactly right. And I think in many ways we've got that piece of student interest or engagement. We can get it backwards. Now, I do like the idea of project-based or passion-based learning. I think it's pretty cool to take student interest and pair it with what they're doing in the classroom. So I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but we just can't ignore the role that actually just being good enough at something plays. Because it turns out students can actually get excited, I think, in just about anything. Again, it's a John Hattie quote, but he said every student brings an enormous amount of motivational resources to class with them. So they can get excited about it, but sometimes it doesn't mean you have to pair your biology with skateboarding or your history with a soccer World Cup. Actually, if people just can get the key facts in their head and feel like they know what's going on, well, that'll actually get you there.
I like that. Yeah. So just kind of connecting and having scaffolding, it sounds like. Just like it's not willy-nilly. Yeah. Kids get to do whatever they want, but having a little bit of choice within some parameters. Correct.
I think there's a nice balance to be struck between passion and sort of project-based learning and just a pre-existing curriculum. We want to be striking a wise balance, but I don't think we do ourselves any favors when we veer off into either extreme, really.
Gotcha. So this is now causing me to wonder, it seems like a pretty clear connection on how you maybe got involved with using AI and starting My Teacher Aid. I'm interested, how did this all come to be? Where did the ideas come from? When did you get started?
Well, I got started really in November, November 22, when ChatGPT first launched. I started using it. I had a ball, although I was quite skeptical as to the real world application. I thought, I might make poems about my friend's dog and these sorts of things, but I couldn't see it actually making an impact. And then all of a sudden, I was on a walk and I started realizing that I was actually surrounded by tired teachers and struggling students. And I thought perhaps there is some opportunity for AI to make a big difference here. So what I did was I started talking with people. I've got an extensive professional network of fellow teachers, and I just started asking, hey, look, what do you really struggle with? What's getting you down? And I looked around, I looked within. So, what am I finding the pinch points are for me? And it was 3 big things. It was that I didn't have enough time. It was that I didn't feel like I was really able to bring my best in the classroom. And it was that I felt like I wasn't making a big enough impact. So really, that was then the core philosophy behind my teacher aid. We want to build AI tools specifically designed for teachers that help them save time, be more creative, and have a bigger impact. So, and that's my desire for sort of simplicity and removing the complexity. It also came out in the way we design the tools. My big philosophy here, Sam, is that we don't need to use brand new technology to do brand new things. Like, that's a big fear. I was just in North Carolina last week, and a big fear was that, look, I've got these pedagogical strategies, these lessons, this content that I've developed over 20 years. Am I going to have to put that in the bin and start again if I use new tech? And thankfully, no, the answer is no, you don't. Actually, using new technology doesn't have to be about the metaverse and virtual reality and cryptocurrency and NFTs. We don't need to use new tech to do new things. We can just use new tech to do the basics of education better, right? We can use it to do the things we know work more often for more learners. That's what's going to make the difference. Like, I'm yet to see a big evidence base for getting artificially intelligent virtual reality Plato in your class, as cool as that might be. But using AI to differentiate texts so that every learner can read what I need them to read, there is a stack of papers taller than me with evidence about that. So that's what we use it for. We don't use new tech to do crazy new things. We use it to do the basics better. So it's those sorts of ideas that really culminated and were infused into this software, which we now, again, we partner with a whole bunch of schools and we're allowing them to do the basics of education better. And for me, that's something that gets me really excited.
I'm excited by that as well. In our district in Utah, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this region. So I'm sure you know about like California, huge tech companies over there. Utah has kind of become a mini Silicon Valley of tech startups. So we're fortunate enough to have an AI built for teachers, tech startup happen locally for us. And it just happened that Texas, you were just in Texas, the founders were in Texas, our superintendent was in Texas at the same conference, and they met up, and it was just kind of this serendipitous, hey, we're doing this brand new thing. Do you want to try it? And our superintendent had the vision enough to say, yeah, let's do it. And this was at the beginning of last school year, I guess the summer preceding that. So before last school year began, we kind of got in on the ground with this AI software called School AI. I don't know if you've heard of them yet. They're starting to make waves.
Yeah, sure have.
And so it's been phenomenal to be able to have these tools to give to our teachers and students. They have spaces for students to chat that are customized for them, kind of what you're talking about, this one-on-one personalized learning experiences. Something that I found, though, as I'm a digital coach, is that there are some teachers that are still maybe reluctant to get on the AI train, so to speak, because of whatever misconceptions they have. Have you run into similar things as you're promoting your product? What kinds of roadblocks have you seen with adoption and things like that?
Sure. So I do a lot of work with schools in this space. So I have my teacher aid. So if I were to draw you a Paul Matthews org chart, I have my teacher aid. That's a software for teachers. I also run a consultancy that helps schools navigate the problems and possibilities of AI as well. So I do two different things. In both arenas, I see tech hesitant teachers. And there's all sorts of what we might label in students self-limiting beliefs. I'm not a tech person. I'm not an early adopter. I've never been good with technology. There's a few things that it's important to say here. First of all is our students are watching, and the way we respond to new technology will impact the way they respond to everything that they're confronted with. Why is that? Because new technology, what does it do? It's new information, and we have to learn about it. Now, we always talk about schools being a learning community, but if in your commentary to students, you're constantly saying, I don't like change, I don't like new stuff, well, we're actually expecting them to come in the classroom and learn new things every single day. So what are they learning from us? What are they picking up from us when we refuse to learn anything about something new? When we just plug in and play and sort of put our old lessons from 10 years ago in the microwave, reheat them and bring them out again, what are we actually teaching our students about learning? What's the sort of meta story we're telling them there? So it's really important that we focus on being learners ourselves, where schools are learning communities and we can model a learning disposition in the way we approach AI. So I think that's really wise. But secondly, whenever I consult or whenever I train with my teacher aid, I start not by defining AI, not by getting open ChatGPT or my teacher aid. What I do is I simply present the teachers with a bunch of resources. Here is a reading that we've done. Here is a version of that reading, which is at a grade 5 level. Here's a version that's at a grade 3 level. Here's a version that's very simple dot points. Here's a multiple choice question retrieval practice quiz based on that. Here are some sentence starters based on the reading to then get your students writing. And here's an exit ticket at the end of the lesson to get your students reflecting on what they've learned. A whole suite of great resources. And I say, you know what? It's tailored, it's personalized, it's individualized, and it took me 3.5 minutes. See, what does that show? It shows I'm benefiting myself and I'm benefiting my students. I've met a lot of tech hesitant teachers. I haven't met a single benefit hesitant teacher. And so that's why I think we always lead with the benefits, because that's what hooks people in.
And those are similar conversations that I have. And I am so blessed to be at the school that I am. I've been here my whole full-time teaching career. I did, obviously some stuff at university, teaching at other middle schools and things like that. But this school that I'm at has been so good to me. Paul, I'm sure how good an administration is, how good the people are that you're on the team with. And, there have been a lot of times where I now have a 30-minute commute to work where it used to be 7 minutes, but I keep coming back because of the people. And so being able to interact with them and help teachers to better their craft has been awesome. We have a pretty receptive staff here. And so I love hearing things like that just kind of reinforcing conversations that I've had with our teachers. Okay, I'm just kind of collecting my thoughts so I don't get off track too far. So with my teacher aid, you mentioned there's kind of 3 foundational pillars of what it's meant to do. Could you go into a little more detail on those?
Sure. Yeah. So in our pilot program, we had 500 Australian educators on board, and we said, what are the biggest pain points? Now, the good thing about it, Sam, is that I'm a teacher and my co-founder is a teacher. So he's the one who's done the technical side of things, and I do a lot of the relationships, and I do a lot of the speaking and teaching and leading and that sort of thing. We're both teachers, so we know this. I was actually up in Queensland, so the other end, the north side of Australia recently, and we were with a whole bunch of AI companies who were talking to schools, and we were actually the only teachers. And I tell you what, you could sniff the difference from a mile away. People who were trying to muscle their way into the ed space from the tech side, well, they just don't create technology that is intuitive for teachers. That's what I found. They use words we don't use. You say the word pedagogy and they go cross-eyed. It really does help having a teaching background. But we found that the teachers, predominantly, it was 3 things: saving time, being more creative, and having a bigger impact. So the time-saving piece is important because AI allows us to do a whole lot of things that we were already doing much faster, like rubric creation. I love rubrics, but they take a jolly long time to write, and that means we don't do it very often, and we make our rubrics very generic so that we can use them for 12 different assignments. And because they're so generic, students don't benefit because they have to connect too many dots between what they've done and what the rubric says. Well, now I can create a task-specific rubric, and I can do it in 90 seconds. And what does that mean? It just means I can do best practice in less time, and that's great. I'm a big believer in that teachers, they don't just want to save time. So you see a lot of the ed tech companies out there saying, save 4 hours a week or save 2 hours a week. I really think if you gave teachers a choice, they could hit one of 2 buttons, like that meme, right? One of 2 buttons that they could hit. One was save time. The other one was have a bigger impact. I think teachers are choosing impact. I really do. That's why we got into this. We didn't get into teaching so we could drink umbrella drinks on the beach and play more golf. We got into teaching to have a big impact, right? So we want to help teachers save time where they can. But that time, I think, can actually then be spent on doing some really engaging things, some creative things. And that's the second idea. Save time and be more creative. So then I can bring more of myself when I'm not stuck doing this low-level admin. I can do more creative things tailored to my learners, things tailored to my context, things that AI can't do, build relationships like you talked about at the top of this episode. I'm a big fan of getting AI to do what it can do so that we can do what only we can do. Right?
I love that.
And then have a bigger impact, of course. So we're providing differentiated readings. We're providing questions that students answer at multiple levels of complexity. We're doing all these sorts of things that allow us to tailor our instruction to the various students in our room. So they're the three things. And I've got to tell you, Sam, I have not met a teacher that doesn't want to save time, be more creative, and have a bigger impact. So I think we're on pretty safe ground in that space.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I'm excited to follow your journey, see how my teacher aid blows up, and just gets into more places. Kind of circling back again to the idea of how we start class. Does my teacher aid? It sounds like it would. How might a teacher use AI to help them with that first? Let's say a new teacher who is like brand new, like, I don't know what to do. I've never done this before. How does AI play a role in helping to start class creatively? Or
especially if they've got a 90-minute lesson, right? I mean, that's a lot of real estate to cover, isn't it? I was thinking about that as we were talking beforehand. 90 minutes is a big chunk of time. And certainly when you get to the more proficient stage of your career, you're going, man, there's so much more I want to say that I didn't get time to say. In those early days, you're going, I have got a lot of time left at the end of my content here. So you're looking around and you're going, boy, oh boy, I'm halfway through the lesson and I've just taught everything I know on this subject. So yeah, it's a unique struggle, isn't it? I think there's a number of things that AI in general and my teacher aid specifically can help teachers with. So there's things like simple brainstorming. So we're talking about being more creative. So cards on the table, when I was teaching that lesson on World War I and alliances and trying to get students thinking in that vein of like an interesting hook that they could then talk about, share about and reflect on, I used AI to brainstorm. So one of the big overarching sort of ideas I think we need to talk about with AI is you need to use AI for options, not answers. So if you're looking for an engaging hook to your lesson, don't ask for an engaging hook. Ask for 5 engaging hooks because we need to remember we're the experts. So we have knowledge about our students, our context, our classroom, our content that the AI just doesn't have. So if I need something, I ask for 5 of that thing and I pick the best one. And so every teacher will have a rough idea of what they'd like to do. And actually using AI to brainstorm, not give me the answer, but give me 5 options and I'll choose the answer. Using AI to brainstorm is a great way to make sure we're getting really engaging content that draws our learners into the learning and stops them from being sort of disengaged and then sort of that chronic disengagement which leads to non-attendance and so forth. So I think actually using AI, not just to save time, but that brainstorming piece, being more creative, getting highly tailored, relevant examples, questions, readings, and so forth. I think there's a huge opportunity for us there.
Yeah, I agree. That's how I use AI for my own practice most of the time. And I think that's a great point that I kind of fail to give my teachers. Like, don't ask for the first thing, just like, hey, do this thing for me. Because you're right, we have awesome teacher brains and we know what's best for our students. And AI is really good at kind of getting the ball rolling, so to speak. So yeah, I that's another thing. I'm going to take that.
I'm not sure I ran this by you beforehand, but I've got a book coming out pretty soon. It's published by Christian Schools International, and it's called A Time to Lead. And it's about the idea that it's not about burying our heads in the sand. It's not about wishing we were teaching in a different time. It's actually upon us. It's our duty to lead our students, teachers, and school communities wisely through these changes. And in that book, there's 10 principles. I think I narrowed it down to 9 in the end, 9 principles of wise AI use. And that's a big one. Ask for options, not answers. Okay. And it comes down to the framework with which you approach AI, because there's a lot of bad metaphors out there. Like Magic School is one of the biggest AI tools out there for teachers. I got to tell you, I mean, I don't go in for the tools so much. I think they're a little basic and a little generic, but the metaphor is terrible. AI is not magic. And if that's the framework with which you approach AI, it's going to leave you with so many bad assumptions that I think you're going to get limited value. I don't even, to be a little bit controversial, Sam, I don't even like the idea of a co-pilot. Like my classroom does not have 2 steering wheels. Right? I'm actually in control. I don't want someone sitting next to me wrestling with me for control of my classroom. Actually, I want someone under me. I want an aide. And that's, again, why we called our startup My Teacher Aid. And that's the dominant metaphor that I think everyone should adopt when we use AI. It's AI as an aid. It's your assistant. You're the expert. You're the boss, and you get it to do, sort of cut through the busy work so that you can get to doing what only you can do.
Really, really great perspective. It sounds like when your book comes out, we need to have another follow-up episode. Get you back on.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Awesome.
I'd love to. I'll see if I can get you a copy.
Yeah, love it. The other thing that I think about and that I read a lot about on LinkedIn, or just kind of like cruising the internet, understanding my job better, is a lot of teachers leaving the profession. And that's something that we've had at our school, some pretty high turnover over the past couple of years, where a teacher will come in, they'll stay for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and then they try to find greener pastures. How might things like My Teacher Aid, or what does your experience tell you about kind of overcoming that 3 years? It's like that 3-year hump. Like if you get past 3 years, you kind of figured it out.
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And some of the interesting research out of the United States shows us that it costs about $20,000 to turn over a staff member by the time you've got separation costs and then advertising costs, interviewing, and then the loss of productivity that it takes having a brand new staff member who doesn't know how to print or doesn't know where the toilets are, or these sorts of, it costs about 20 grand. So that's a pretty eye-watering statistic, I think, if you look at the sort of the downside of staff turnover, not only the cultural downside, but there's a big financial downside too. I think some of the problems that are giving rise to burnout are due to workload. People feel overworked and overwhelmed. In Australia, some of the leading research says that actually 70% of teachers say their workload is unmanageable. So not that it's hard, not that they've got a lot of work, that they can't actually manage the work. Feeling chronically overloaded and overwhelmed, well, it doesn't lead to human flourishing. We can at least agree on that, can't we? And so that's where I think it's incumbent upon schools to do two things. Firstly, I think if they're able to get good technology and good training, and the training is really important. When people partner with AI companies, and that's what I see it as. I see it as a partnership. So I'm often on the phone with our principals. I'm often tweaking their version of My Teacher Aid to suit their vision, mission, values, learner attributes, these sorts of things. When they partner with an AI company, and I think they should, there's enough benefits there to do that, they need to get training as well. And that's something we're big on. All the training through My Teacher Aid is free. There's no additional cost, right? And that's really important to us, because there's not a tool in the world that's worthwhile if you don't know how to use it. And so you need training. Some ed tech companies, they're sending a link and a login, and what you actually need is personalized partnership. That's what you need. And so you need the tools, you need the training, but also I think school communities and districts need to say, if we can find efficiencies here, if AI does actually result in meaningful workload reduction, we're not just going to give teachers more work. So this morning, I had the privilege of speaking at a sort of a parallel industry. So this was the water industry in Tasmania. So all the people who manage stormwater and getting water to houses and waterways. Yeah. I was on an AI panel there this morning. And that was a big query that they had. Hey, look, if AI does make our jobs easier to do, are we just going to get given more work? And I think we need to make a commitment as school communities and say, look, our teachers are churning. It's not good. If we can reduce their workload, we're just going to let them sit there with their reduced workload so that we're not frying them to a crisp every 3 to 5 years. Does that make sense?
Yes. Because I think that is true. Like a lot of times, maybe you do make it past that 3-year hump, but then the principal's now asking you to be on more committees and more things because you're proficient. And so, now that, and that's, I think something that I fall into as a coach. I try to tell my teacher, like, oh yeah, don't worry about all that the first couple of years, but then after that, boy, you could start doing more things. And really, is that helpful? Is that not helpful? I think after this conversation, I think maybe that's a little less helpful. And to say, get really proficient at that thing and don't put anything else on your plate. If you talk to my wife, that's something that I'm really bad at. Kind of like you. I like having a project. I like having things to do. Our big break during the summer is sometimes a challenge for me. I'm just at home. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love being with them. But then it gets to that point where you're like, all right, are we going back? Is this time? But so I think there is great power, just as, in a holistic sense of making sure that all of our needs are met and that we're not doing more than is necessary for us to do. That gives us the best,
I think so.
best version of ourselves.
I think so. We're going to talk about teacher burnout a bit more, aren't we? Because I noticed that's something that's on the agenda for our conversation, because that's actually, man, I tell you, that's something I've done a lot of thinking about. It's something I was thinking about well before I started my teacher aid. I think, it's the scourge of the education profession. So, I'm keen to hear your thoughts also on preventing teacher burnout, and I've got a few ideas of my own.
Yeah, and so we'll go there. That's where we're headed next. For our academic year, when does your academic year begin?
February.
Okay. So when you're coming out of
our
summer.
Our summer is over December, January.
Gotcha. Okay. So February, your academic year starts. So it'll make my timeline. I'll try to calculate it in my head. But for us, we start now. I just had my second day of school, second day of classes. Love my kids. It's going to be a new year. Kind of a side tangent. Have you found at the end of an academic year, you love your kids and they're like, those are my kids in this class. Then when the new crop of kids come in, it's like watching your favorite TV show and a new character comes in and you don't know if you like them yet. But then by the end, you realize like, oh, how could I not have ever had these students?
That's good. I love that. That's a good metaphor.
That was my experience today with my anatomy kids, because I fall in love with my students, and new kids come in, their new faces. I'm like, oh, John used to sit there. You're not John, and kind of figuring all that out. But anyway, so our kind of arc for burnout, in my experience, is we'll start the year pretty strong. Everybody's pretty highly motivated, especially new teachers. They're eager and they're really excited to do work, and they work hard. This is even evident by like parking spaces at school. So like you come the first couple of days, man, teachers are there on time, getting the good parking spots. But then as we kind of dip towards like our long winter break, so around Christmas time, December, January, coming back in January, realizing that, oh my gosh, we still have all the way until end of May, some schools into June. And that's when I really have found that teachers kind of get into this, I don't want to do it. And then that's when the conversations start kind of turning like, man, is teaching the thing that I want to still be doing? Because this is hard. Parking spaces are open in the morning in the wintertime. Yeah. And so something that I don't know that I have a good solution. My kind of idea to get around it is really to try to turn up the dial on creativity, which is thankfully now where AI can really help out a ton in this creativity aspect, but doing something new and novel that is new for the kids, because they're feeling the same way at that point. Like they've just come off a great holiday and now they're back and they're like, oh yeah, that's right. I have to sit through Mr. Densley's anatomy class. Cool. He's telling dad jokes again, Yeah. And so I think like shaking it up and really just almost like flipping the script, so to speak, and doing something that's out of the box, big different change, maybe changing, rearranging the seats, rearranging like the classroom in general. Those are kind of my suggestions and things, just to try to find a creative way to teach something or a new novel way to present material. It helps me to get over that, because if I can make it into February, that's when the weather starts to kind of die down a little bit. We can see a little more of the sun. It's not, so cold, and spring is coming. And that, like, once you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you kind of get out of that. So yeah, I'm interested to hear kind of what if you guys follow a similar arc, like midway through the year, it gets really tough.
I think it does. Yeah, that's part of being a human being, isn't it? We're not just brains on sticks. So we're sort of hearts, souls, mind, strength. We've got all these complex things going on. So when there's less sun, we're going to be less happy. That's just seasonal affective disorder. That's what ironically called SADS. So yeah, look, that's for sure something. I've worked with a lot of early career teachers on actually maintaining passion and maintaining sort of health, mental health, physical health during their teaching career. There's a few things I always say. There's a meta principle that we start with, or that whenever I'm talking with a new teacher, I always start with this principle. I say, you always start with you set a limit on something. So it's either your time or the quality of your content. So some teachers, they say, my content will always be this good. And then however much time that takes, well, it'll just take what it takes, but it's always got to be this good. When I started, I said, I'm setting a limit on my time. And sort of however good my content is after having spent that time teaching, that's how good it is. And so some teachers, what they do is they have excellent content from day one, sort of year one, from year 1 to year 10, they have excellent content, and they gradually spend less time doing the work. Maybe they're spending 2 or 3 hours less a week by year 5 or 6 because their content is still excellent. I did the opposite. So I'm not ashamed to say that my first year of teaching, I just wasn't that good. Like some of my PowerPoints didn't look that great. I could have added more detail or more nuance to the direct instruction. I could have varied my pedagogy a bit more, but I didn't because I said, I'm capping my time. I'm capping the amount of time I'm willing to spend planning. And then you know what's going to increase over time? It's actually the quality of my content. So every year I'm reflecting what worked well, what didn't work well, how can I improve? And so actually I have not spent like an hour less or more in my preparation phase over the years I've been teaching because that's capped, that's standard. What's increased, however, is the quality of my goods. Now, there might be some teachers who are going, look, I couldn't possibly walk into the classroom with something less than perfect, less than what I was really happy with. Like I'm not happy with a time cap that means some of my content isn't as good as it could be. That's fine if you can't walk into the classroom that way, but you just remember, you got to keep walking into the classroom. And actually, if having great lesson and high quality materials and beautiful PowerPoints is going to mean actually at some point in the next 2 years, you're going to stop walking into that classroom, I'd say, what are you doing it for? What are you doing it for? Like, just make sure you can keep teaching. It's such an impactful role. You can have such an outsized impact on your learners, on your community. You just got to keep doing it. So I would say that's the meta principle, is just you got to put a limit on something. I would say put a limit on your time and allow yourself the grace to just get better and better and better as time goes on. And the second thing I changed, and this was really big for me, was feedback. Now you got to have the backing of your school community to do this. But I actually found early on in my teaching career, with the feedback I was given, I'd mark a lot of essays as a history teacher. There was a supply and demand issue. I think I was supplying far more feedback than there was demand for. And so I'd write 2 or 3 paragraphs on a 5-paragraph essay. And I go, hang on a second here.
Yeah.
And I was sort of, a mentor of mine said, hang on, Paul, I'm not so sure about this. Now what I do is I say, thank you for your essay. Here's one thing you did really well. And I list it. Here's one thing I want you to improve on next time. List it. Thanks for your work. That's it. And so that has taken me from 20 minutes per essay to 6 minutes per essay. And if I'm quartering that amount of time, that means I'm getting through it much faster and the feedback is actually more actionable. So those 2 things I think are really important for the way that we engage with our profession in such a way that we can keep doing it for a long period of time.
That brings a couple of thoughts to mind. So there's I forget what the name of this principle is, but however much time you give yourself is how long that task will take. So I find that with my students, if I say, you guys have 2 weeks to do this project, it's going to be 2 weeks for them to get that project done. But if I say, you have 3 class periods to do, same requirements, it'll take 3 class periods to do that. And so it sounds like, kind of circling back to our conversation about, will AI make us more proficient? Yeah, but are we going to have to do more work? Not necessarily. So I like this idea of capping how much time we put into things, because we'll find a way to squeeze in the product in the amount of time that we give ourselves. And that's why I'm a huge proponent, and I do similar things. I encourage new teachers and seasoned teachers alike to not take their computer home. Don't take your laptop home. Just leave it on your desk. And if that means that maybe you come in 10 minutes early, maybe come in 10 minutes early. But don't bring it home. I was listening to another podcast on my way to work this morning, and kind of the thought was, and I've heard this a lot as well, and you may have as well, is that if I go to work and something tragic happens, there's going to be another teacher that will come take my place. Like they will. Learning will go on. It'll be sad, and I hope a lot of people will come to the party, and celebrate my life. But I'll get replaced, and my students will still learn things and still go. But what can't be replaced is me for my family. And so kind of having that perspective of where am I showing up, where am I putting that time, and how am I valuing my time and efforts? Great thoughts. I love those ideas.
Yeah, and I think the last thing is to consider is it's often this, and this might be a little too harsh. So feel free to temper this. I'm happy to be a bad guy and say this, and people can push back or not. But it can almost appear as like a species of humility, that workaholism. Oh, the job is just so important. I've got to keep going. I've got to keep working my evenings, weekends, holidays. I've got to keep doing this because, this is so important. And I've got to, in reality, I think we need to remember that we are one small piece of the puzzle in a child's life. There's a lot going on. There's that child, there's their family circumstance, there's their whatever sort of community groups or churches they might be involved in as well. There's their peer group. There's every other teacher at the school. Actually taking it upon ourselves to try and single-handedly provide everything this child needs to learn, well, I don't think it takes into account the full perspective. I think we can actually step back and just go, you know what? There's a lot of factors at play. I am one of them, and I'm going to moderate my effort to reflect that. Like, I'm going to do what I can for this student. There's no doubt. I love them. I care for them. I want them to flourish, but it's not my job to make them flourish. Like I can't single-handedly do that for them. And so I need my energy and my effort and even my disposition. So much of burnout is actually the sort of mental frameworks within which we're operating, not just the time it takes. I know that some of my most fulfilling weeks have been in the classroom have been the busiest, and some of my most discouraging weeks have been the quietest. Because for me, in my life, and it might be different for different teachers, burnout is not about time spent doing things, it's about impact being made. And so if I feel like I'm walking out there every day and just not making an impact at all, then that is what sort of leads me to go, hang on a second, what am I doing here? If I'm pedaling as fast as I can, but I know I'm making a difference, then that's really good. However, I need to remember all the while that while I like to make a difference, there's a narrow slice of the pie that I'm responsible for. So I want to do all I can within that scope, whilst also recognizing that there are huge other factors at play in this child's life, and that are going to have a big lot of explanatory power over how they turn out. It's not just down to the 4 periods a week of history they get with me to make the difference.
Yeah. And so this is kind of coming full circle to our conversation. Battling burnout really is a matter of kind of perfecting our craft and using our time wisely. And a lot of that can be done through the way that we spend our time in class, like those first few minutes of class. Like, what are we doing to make that meaningful? Because as much of this that applies to teachers, a lot of our conversation, I think, also applies to our students in the way that we need to help them understand how learning works and how to do things that are hard, and overcome challenges using technology appropriately, setting limits for ourselves. Oh, man, good conversation. I have loved every minute of this. Thank you very much.
It's been a treat, Sam. I'm happy to come back anytime, and I wish you all the best. It seems like you're onto a good thing here with your podcast. So not only has it been a real treat to be part of the first episode, but you can bet your bottom dollar that I will be tuning in for subsequent episodes.
Oh, love that. We've got some good stuff coming. So to kind of give you like a little peek at the flow of how I'm planning the show is, each month I'll have teachers from my building that are kind of talking about challenges that we're giving our teachers. Specifically, you'll be interested to hear what our art teacher is doing during her first 15 minutes of class. That'll come out in a little while. Similarly, we'll talk about the back end of class, which is something we didn't really get a chance to talk about, but we're trying to really focus on remediation. So using that last 15 minutes for more of that personalized time with students, extending or doing remediation with them. And so then sprinkled in, I'm really excited to have people like you to kind of supplement, like, okay, here's what's happening at our school here locally, but here's also the same thing happening all over the planet, which I hope will help to unify this community of educators, to help us all realize that, okay, the problems that I'm having in my classroom aren't unique to me, and it's not because I'm a bad teacher, but it's everywhere. And these are all things that everybody's working on. So yeah, a podcast tradition that I've learned is fun random questions at the end. So I've got one for you.
Rock and roll.
I watched the Olympics. Did you get into the Olympics this past summer?
I didn't, unfortunately. I mean, we had the world's most embarrassing breakdancer from our home country.
I didn't watch the ladies breakdancing, so I don't know all. I've seen the memes. But no, I really got into watching the rugby matches.
Nice.
And I'm a soccer player. I played soccer through high school and college. I coached the women's soccer team here at my school for a number of years. So I'm interested for you. Are you more of a soccer football guy, or is rugby taking the cake for you?
I got to tell you, and this is what I have a staunch tradition of not taking either option in a forced choice question. So I'm going to say Formula One and cycling, because I don't like, they're the two. Yeah. It's unfortunate because we play all of those other sports. We play rugby, we play soccer, we play all sorts of stuff in Australia, and that's streamed in our time zone, and you can watch it at the local oval. And for whatever reason, I have grown passionate about sports that are only taking place in Europe most of the time, and then it's on at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. And so, look, I have not done myself any favors there, to be honest with you, Sam.
So am I understanding that rugby, soccer is kind of divisive in Australia, like whether you're on one side of the fence or the other?
We've got a sport called Australian rules. So that's, if you look up AFL on YouTube, that's the one. So on the east coast of Australia, we've got basically from Sydney down is AFL, and from Sydney up is rugby.
Interesting.
And so, it's a little bit divisive.
Yeah.
But then again, it is what it is. They're all ball sports with a funny shaped ball. So, we even have a few at our school. We have one of Tasmania's only gridiron, like American football style programs.
Wow.
So we're also doing that too. So watch out. We might be sending some recruits your way in the next couple of years.
That'll be awesome. So Formula One then, do you have a favorite driver, favorite auto racer? Like who do you follow?
Yeah. Look, man, I tell you, I love McLaren, Team McLaren. I love an underdog. So that used to be Red Bull, and then they started winning everything the whole time. And
That's true.
Now I like McLaren. I like Oscar Piastri because he's a compatriot. So he's also an Australian, and I like Lando Norris. So I'm a McLaren guy. I like both the drivers.
Nice.
And I want to see them. I don't know how into it you are, but I want to see them win the Constructors' Championship this year.
A little bit into Formula One. I follow rally a little bit more closely.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm a Team Subaru, factory Subaru guy all the way. I drive a Subaru. I imagine sometimes that I'm like David Higgins or somebody, zipping around. But awesome.
Do you have a nice sounding Subaru? Like, do people know when you arrive and when you leave?
No. It's a dad Subaru. I'll say it's
sure.
It's normal little Forester. Gets me where I need to go and places that I don't need to go.
That'll do the job.
So, yeah, definitely does. Okay. Paul, thank you so much for coming on Think Like a Teacher, our very first episode. I think it was a smash. It was awesome. I'm really excited to continue the conversation when your book comes out. For those of you listening, definitely check out, Paul, where can we find you? What's the best place to get into your stuff?
Look, let me be honest, Sam. I spend what could only be classed as way too much time on LinkedIn. So that is the best place to get to me. If you look up Paul Matthews AI, and that's Matthews with two T's, Paul Matthews AI, that's probably the best place to get in touch. Send me a message. Let's connect. I'd love to have a chat. I'd love to talk to you about how you're using AI. You can share all the hot gossip about Sam Densley with me as well. So that'll be a bit of fun. LinkedIn is probably the best place, Sam.
Awesome. Cool. And recently you gave a talk, a TED Talk in Hobart. I listened to that. That was excellent. So check out the TED Talk. I'll try to leave links to all of those things in the show notes for this. And keep teaching. Thanks.
That'd be great. Yeah, if you could watch that TED Talk 10 or 20,000 times, that would be fantastic. I'd really appreciate it if each of your listeners could get onto that for me.
Awesome. Okay, thanks very much.